The ground gave no warning. One moment, families were walking a boardwalk 2 miles from Old Faithful, cameras out, children pointing at the shimmer of Black Diamond Pool. The next moment, the earth detonated beneath their feet. A column of water, rock, and mud exploded 400 to 600 feet into the sky, taller than most skyscrapers, a geological fist punching through the surface of the planet. Boulders several feet across, each weighing hundreds of pounds, arced through the morning air like cannonballs and landed near the Firehole River. The boardwalk was incinerated. The benches were gone. The fence was gone. The ground where tourists had been standing seconds earlier was a smoking crater of mud and steam. Dozens of people ran for their lives. By some extraordinary miracle, not one person died. July 23, 2024. Biscuit Basin, Yellowstone National Park. And right now, in the spring of 2026, that basin is still closed. It has been closed the entire season. Superintendent Cam Sholey has said it will only reopen when scientists at the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory give the go-ahead. They have not given the go-ahead. That was the opening act. This is what has happened since. Starting in July 2025, Yellowstone began doing 3 things simultaneously that it has not done in decades. Not in any combination. Not at this scale. Not like this. And every scientist watching it is choosing their words with the kind of careful, measured precision that, if you are paying attention, is more frightening than if they were screaming. Here is the first thing. A patch of ground 19 miles across, roughly the footprint of the entire city of Chicago, has risen approximately 1 inch on the north rim of the Yellowstone caldera, just south of Echinus Geyser Basin near Gibbon Falls. 1 inch does not sound like much until you understand what is underneath it. 17 GPS stations are tracking the movement in real time. Satellite radar locked it in, measuring the rise consistently between October 2024 and October 2025. More than 100 earthquakes accompanied it across 2025, with another swarm rattling through in November. The largest measured magnitude 2.7. Then, in mid-January 2026, the bulge paused, just stopped, and nobody has fully explained why. Scientists are calling it the Norris Uplift Anomaly. Michael Polland is the USGS geophysicist in charge of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory. He chose his words carefully when he described it. He said it is an area over 19 miles across, give or take a few miles, and that calling it the size of Chicago makes it sound incredibly grandiose, but that he thinks it is, quote, pretty stunning. And then, almost reflexively, the caveat he has repeated in every single interview since, he said that does not mean the volcano is about to erupt. It is Yellowstone being Yellowstone. Remember those words. We are coming back to them. Here is the second thing. On New Year's Eve 2025, at 10:02 p.m. Pacific Time, just before midnight in Yellowstone, Steamboat Geyser erupted. Steamboat is the tallest active geyser on the surface of the Earth. Its water column can climb 400 feet into the sky, taller than the Statue of Liberty. At the peak of its modern reawakening in 2019 and 2020, it erupted 48 times in a single year. Then the energy began to drain away. 20 times in 2021, 11 in 2022, 9 in 2023, 6 in 2024, then 5, then 3, the last of which came on April 14th. After that, silence. 230 consecutive days of silence. No eruptions, no buildup, no warning signs, just stillness from the tallest geyser on Earth. And then, at 10:02 p.m. on New Year's Eve, against a black winter sky, a pilot named Jeremy Hutcherson, flying for Jackson Hole Wildlife Safaris, looked out his window and watched 400 feet of water and steam explode into the darkness below him. He caught it on camera. Michael Polland, when asked about Steamboat's erratic behavior, said something that should stop you cold. He said that in the past, they would see a buildup of minor activity that would culminate in a major eruption. Now, he said, they are not seeing those minor eruptions lead to anything. And then, plainly and without flinching, he said this, the sequence of frequent, predictable eruptions is probably over. The tallest active geyser on Earth is now behaving in ways that its own overseers cannot predict. Steamboat is silent again tonight. Here is the third thing. On February 7, 2026, Echinus Geyser erupted for the first time in 6 years. Echinus is not just any geyser. It is the largest acidic geyser in the world, with a pH of 3.3, water so hot and chemically aggressive it can eat through steel. For 6 years it was dormant. Then it erupted. And then again on February 9th, and the 12th, and the 15th. Since February 16th, Echinus has been erupting on a cycle of every 2 to 5 hours, sending boiling acid water 20 to 30 feet into the air, each eruption lasting 2 to 3 minutes. In its historical peak in the 1970s, Echinus threw jets over 75 feet. Something has changed in the plumbing underneath it. Something has changed enough to wake it up after 6 years of complete silence and put it on a relentless 2 to 5 hour cycle, and nobody is entirely sure what. 3 anomalies. 8 months. The same park. Now, the USGS is being precise about something important. The bulge and the geysers are technically different systems. The bulge originates from magmatic activity, molten rock breathing 9 miles beneath the surface. The geysers are hydrothermal, water and steam circulating in the shallower crust above. Officially, the two systems are unrelated. But here is what is also true. They are all happening at the same time, in the same place, after decades of relative quiet. And people are starting to ask the question. So let's be honest about the real danger here, because it is not the one you have seen in disaster movies. The word geologists say quietly, with the weight of someone who has studied what it actually means, is this hydrothermal explosion. A hydrothermal explosion is exactly what happened at Biscuit Basin on July 23, 2024. Superheated water, trapped in a confined underground pocket, flashes instantaneously to steam. The pressure finds no release, and then the ground above it detonates like a bomb with no fuse, no countdown, no signal. Yellowstone averages a large one of these every 700 years. But at least 25 explosion craters wider than 100 meters have already been cataloged inside the park's boundaries. Indian Pond, just north of Yellowstone Lake, is one of them. A crater formed 2,900 years ago by the same kind of detonation that obliterated the Biscuit Basin boardwalk in 2024. That is hazard number 1. Not a supervolcanic eruption. A steam bomb buried in the ground beneath the feet of people who have no idea it is there. Hazard number 2 is the ground shaking apart. The USGS is explicit on this. The hazard and risk from large earthquakes is much greater than a volcanic eruption because earthquakes happen so much more frequently. And Yellowstone has already shown the world what that looks like in living memory. August 17, 1959, 11:37 p.m. Mountain Time. A magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck 6.5 miles west-northwest of West Yellowstone, Montana. Within seconds, 50 million cubic yards of rock tore off the south wall of Madison Canyon and buried an entire campground full of sleeping families. Within minutes, a new lake had begun to form behind the slide. It is called Earthquake Lake and it still exists today. Within 24 hours, 289 springs in the Firehole geyser basins had erupted as geysers. 160 of them had never erupted in recorded history. 28 people died that night, most of them under the Madison slide. They never came out. If a quake on the scale of Hebgen Lake struck tomorrow, here is the geography it would walk through. Biscuit Basin first, already closed, already unstable, a system that has already detonated once in the last 2 years. Then Norris, where the 19-mile bulge is still standing an inch higher than it did last July. Then Gibbon Falls. Then Gardner, Montana, population 818, sitting 7/10 of a mile from the only year-round entrance to the park. Then West Yellowstone, Montana, population 1,474, less than a mile from the 1959 epicenter. Then Jackson Hole, Wyoming, population 10,680. Then Cody, Wyoming, population 10,463. The combined year-round population of those 4 gateway towns is roughly 23,500 people. That is the permanent number. That is who lives there in the quiet months. In 2025, Yellowstone received 4,762,988 visitors. That is the second highest visitation total ever recorded in the park's history. That is up 5.3% over 2024. On a peak August afternoon, the tourist population inside the park alone outnumbers every single gateway town combined by a factor of more than 10. And the 19-mile bulge sits upstream from all of it. 9 miles down, 100 earthquakes in a single year. A pause in January that nobody has explained. 17 GPS stations listening around the clock to a piece of ground that has risen a full inch since last July. Jamie Farrell is the chief seismologist at the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory and a professor at the University of Utah. He co-authored the April 2025 Nature paper that pinpointed the top of Yellowstone's magma chamber at just 3.8 kilometers beneath the surface. 3.8 kilometers. That is not geological abstraction. That is closer to the surface than some oil wells. Farrell frames the whole system with a phrase that is equal parts reassurance and unease. He calls Yellowstone a laboratory volcano, a place so extensively monitored that what scientists learn there can be applied to understand far more dangerous, far less studied volcanoes elsewhere in the world, like Campi Flegrei in Italy or Santorini in Greece. A laboratory with nearly 5 million people walking through it every summer. Families, school groups, tourists from every country on Earth. Standing on a lid. Dan Zurison, USGS geologist emeritus, was asked point-blank whether the Norris Bulge means a clock is ticking somewhere underground. He said impending doom is not coming anytime soon, and he called the uplift data a positive sign because it proves that the monitoring tools now in place can detect things that would have been invisible to scientists even a generation ago. Poland said the same thing in the other direction. He said if there was actually a genuine chance that this magmatic system was preparing to erupt, the deformation would be much, much shallower, and it would be accompanied by other enormous changes happening all at once. 9 miles down is not shallow. 1 inch in 6 months is not fast. 100 earthquakes topping out at magnitude 2.7 is not the swarm that precedes a Plinian eruption. Every measurable precursor that a real eruption would announce itself with shallow deformation, rapid swelling, large earthquakes, dramatic chemistry changes at gas vents, all of it is absent. But here is where the scientists stop, and where the silence becomes its own kind of signal. This exact stretch of ground near Norris has bulged before. Between 1996 and 2004, it rose 5 inches in total across the same location. Then it stopped. Then it subsided. Then, apparently, it started again. And the geysers have cycled through active and quiet periods before. And Echinus has gone dormant and reactivated before. The scientists are right that none of this is unprecedented in isolation. What none of them will say with certainty is what it means when all of it happens at once, in the same 8-month window, after the largest documented hydrothermal explosion in the park's recorded history blew a boardwalk into splinters in the summer before it began. So hold all of it at once. 19 miles across, 1 inch of uplift, 9 miles deep, more than 100 earthquakes in a single year. A pause in January that remains unexplained. 230 days of silence from the tallest geyser on Earth, broken by a single eruption caught on camera from a plane in the dark. An acidic geyser dormant for 6 years erupting every 4 hours into a February sky. A boardwalk that no longer exists. A basin that has been closed for nearly 2 years and counting. 28 dead at Hebgen Lake, most of them still under the mountain. 4,762,988 visitors last year. 631,000 years since the last caldera eruption. 17 GPS stations. 17 instruments bolted to the surface of a continent, pointing downward, listening to something 9 miles beneath the earth that has no voice but keeps breathing. Nobody knows yet what this is building toward. Every scientist who will answer says exactly that. Nobody knows yet. What they do know is this. Biscuit Basin is still closed. The boardwalk is splinters in the mud. Black Diamond Pool is still simmering the way it always simmered. The way it was simmering when the ground opened beside it. The way it will be simmering when the next family walks past it, whenever they are finally allowed back in. Steamboat is silent. Echinus is erupting on its 2 to 5 hour cycle into a sky that does not care. The bulge south of Norris is still standing 1 inch higher than it stood last July, and it has not moved since January, and nobody knows if that means it is done or if it is simply waiting. The magma 9 miles beneath the surface is still breathing. Slowly, deeply, The way something breathes when it is not awake but is not entirely asleep either. And next summer, nearly 5 million people are going to come back. They are going to park their cars and unload their children and walk out onto the ground above it with their cameras and their coffee and their sense that the world beneath their feet is stable and permanent and theirs. They are going to stand over a magma chamber with a ceiling less than 4 miles thick, beside a geyser basin that exploded without warning 18 months ago, in a park that received its second highest visitor count in history the year the ground started rising. The 17 GPS stations will be listening. The question is whether we will be.